Welcome, everybody. It's so great to see everyone. Oh, we have one more person. You sure? So I just wanted to say we're so happy to see everyone on this day, and hopefully we can learn some things about the town hall, and what went on in the past, and kind of come together, kind of just particularly about the veterans in our town. So without further ado, it's myself, my name's Nancy Reed, and I'm the Vice President of the Historic Society, and Doug Sears, our President, Reverend and esteemed attorney. Former selectman, school committee, you name it. And so we all come from that type of background. Different people serve on different boards, and then we have an interest in the history of the town, and so we come together and we learn a lot and have a good time. So we do have a couple singers here from the Tewksbury Memorial High School, Julia Borashek and Sean Carr. And if they want to get us started off by singing the Star Spangled Banner, we do have a few flags here, so we can all do that. Thank you.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watch were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Well, absolutely beautifully done, and having both of you in harmony, and the young people from our Tewksbury schools, from Tewksbury Memorial High School. As Nancy was saying, there are inventive things to do around town, and we want to see if we can do more of little gatherings like this. I was mentioning to Rita O'Brien D. She has been here a bit and doesn't remember our doing anything with these folks whose names are inscribed on this marble, which has been here since 1920. And Nancy will give you the whole story of how this all came to be. So may we begin in the spirit of this being a service with an invocation. And dear Lord, we gather this evening to celebrate the lives of our fellow citizens who served the cause of freedom in World War I. We honor the many sacrifices of those whose names are inscribed on the wall of our town hall, which is a memorial built to honor the 131 young men and women of our community who so served. We remember in particular those who did not survive their service. They're designated by a star on the wall. Dexter Edward Bailey, Dennis O'Connell, Everett E. Fulton. Now, in the memory of all, let us share a moment of silence. Amen. When deciding what to say at this moment, I thought that it best to take the example of one American soldier and speak a few words about him. Vinnie probably knows of Frank Buckles from World War I. He was born in Bethany, Missouri on February 1st, 1901. And 5 months after the American entry into the war on April 6, 1917, he sought to enlist in the armed forces. Now, he was turned down by the Marines because he was not tall enough and was too small. And then he went to the Navy, and they said, you've got flat feet, not here, guy. And he fared better with the Army, and you may see most of the folks back here on the wall were Army soldiers. And they accepted that he was an adult, even he looked no older than 16, which he was. And the sergeant suggested to him that the quickest way for advancement was to go to the front lines and be a driver of ambulances. So he enlisted August 14th, 1917, went through basic training in Fort Riley, Kansas, and then he embarked for Europe on the RMS Carpathia. Now, that name may come to mind in other ways, and that was, as you well know, the ship that rescued those in the water on the sinking of the Titanic in 1912, and at this time it was being used as a troop ship. And during the war, Buckles drove ambulances and motorcycles for the Army's first Fort Riley casual detachment, first in England and then in France. And later he recalled his service as a doughboy. His words, "There was never a shortage of blown-up bodies that needed to be rushed to the nearest medical care. The British and French troops were in bad shape, and even guys about my age looked old and tired. And after 3 years of living and dying inside a dirt trench, the Brits and French were happy to see us doughboys. And every last one of us Yanks believed we'd wrap this thing up in a month or two and head back home before the harvest. In other words, we were the typical cocky Americans no one wants to be around until they need help winning a war." End quote. Well, by 1940, he found himself still in the shipping business in Manila in the Philippines. And after the outbreak of the Pacific War and the invasion of the Philippines, he remained in Manila to help resupply the U.S. troops. And he was captured in January 1942 by Japanese soldiers and spent the next 3 years, 2 months as a civilian internee in the Santo Tomas and Los Banos prison camps, where as a prisoner he battled starvation, receiving only a small meal of mush served in a tin cup. And by the way, he brought that tin cup home with him and kept it for the rest of his life. His weight dipped below 100 pounds from beriberi, and the captains, yes, he was a farmer, He grew vegetables there that he was allowed to, and he particularly helped the starving children who were there at the camp with him. And all the captives were freed following a raid by Allied forces on February 23, 1945. And after World War II, Buckles moved to San Francisco, married Audrey Mayo in 1946, and 8 years later, the couple bought a 330-acre Gap View farm in West Virginia, where he raised cattle. And Buckles continued to farm for the rest of his life. He also was a strong advocate for veterans and was instrumental in getting a World War I memorial built in Pershing Park in Washington, D.C. And on February 27, 2011, Corporal Frank Woodruff Buckles died at the age of 110, the last surviving veteran of World War I.
Thank you so much, Doug. I think that gives a really good idea to people of what life was like at that time. Going back now towards the town and what was going on in the town in, say, 1917, 18, 19. I don't know if people have the handout that's titled "The Town Hall Memorial to World War I and National Roll." It was a handout on the table. And if you didn't get one, please pick one up after. But I will go by that and add a few things. So we have the years, right around 1918. We had the Spanish flu right before that and during that time. We have the unrest in World War I, which was not really called World War I, but we'll call it that for now. Very unsettled times. We also had in the town a need. They had investigated looking into actually building another school. They had built the Foster School in the late 1800s, and it was already filled, and some of the other schools were not really up to code. So they thought, we need a new one. And in reading the town reports, they said, no, there's too much unrest, there's too much unknown right now. We're gonna put aside doing a new school. So all of a sudden, one day in October 1918, right behind us at the Congregational Church and right next door were the original Congregational Church and the second town hall right next door. And unfortunately, they both burned down. They had firemen from Billerica came and everybody, they tried to stop it, but they couldn't. So they were faced with needing a new town hall in the middle of all of the unknowns going on in the world and in the town. They formed a committee and at the same time said, we want to do a town hall, and at the same time we do want to definitely commemorate a memorial to the persons in the war. So after much ado, they decided on the present site right here, which was the Enoch Foster home, and on the paperwork there's a picture there. And at the time, they put the building exactly where the house was and the driveway and everything stayed. Right behind the home was the carriage house, which then later became the town fire station. So this was decided. They had also had another site in mind. I don't know if people know this. They actually had another site in mind on Lee Street, at one of the Lee properties. There's several Lee properties over there, and it was one of those. So they quickly changed that and moved it over to here. So they go to town meeting and appropriate the money, and everything's moving along. They had a building committee, and they also had a memorial committee. So the memorial committee did the best they could to get the names. I do know of a couple of names that did not make it onto the tablets. I don't know if we can fix that or not, but in any case, they did the best they could. We do not have any minutes from the building committee at that time or the memorial committee. What we do have are records at the town clerk's office from that time, a letter from the building committee chairman summarizing what went on. They built the town hall, and these papers are hanging right behind me on this wall inside, that they had, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. So they went ahead, they did the town hall, and they wanted to have these memorial tablets. So at the same time, we have their architect that was chosen, which was Kellerman Hopkins from Boston. And they are, rather prolific in this New England area. They did a lot of buildings in the Back Bay. They did some buildings in Salem, Massachusetts. They also, at the same time, did a couple of town buildings for Lexington, Massachusetts. If we look at the Dover, Massachusetts Town Hall, it is very similar to our town hall. It was built a couple years later. It's a little bit bigger, a little bit different, but what you see is the consistency of the proportions and the lines and the articulation of the way the building looks, the symmetry. They had a way of presenting the building in such a way that would inspire people to meet and do things in a way that was thoughtful. The idea of going up several stairs is a subtle way of raising your mind. It's almost church-like. So you have a respect when you come in. There's a respect that goes on, a general feeling of community when you come in. A very openness from former years. This was where you would come in, and the dialogues from various boards and committees, we would meet here before the meetings. And a lot of things would happen in this very room right here. Those side conversations, those, did you know, those kinds of conversations went on in this room. And the tablets used to be hanging generally one on each side. Because of the way this had to be redone, there wasn't enough room, so they had to be set back there. So we have our town hall. What had happened in my research was I had happened upon the community buildings as war memorials that the War Camp Community Services had put out in 1919, which was a series of 12 volumes. And they had instructions for building committees, basically, that you would use them in your town. It would basically tell you how to do the funding, how to search for an architect, how to engage people and get what kind of a building do you want, what is it that you want, and how to do that. It was fascinating to me that they actually had something like that in 1919. And then they had a lot of examples, and our town hall is one of the examples that was used, because our town had gone through the process. We wanted to have a large meeting room, and we wanted to have, which was in the basement, it was basically a banquet room with a kitchen. There used to be a dumbwaiter so they could bring food upstairs. And they had some offices for the town, and they had a sitting room and I think a library. I don't want to misspeak, but it was basically well thought out and had served the town quite well. I don't want to get into too many of the details that are in the document. When I was online, I thought, there's got to be more to this, because I recall someone telling me that our town had been written up in an architectural magazine. And I thought, I really need to look at this. So I finally found it. And I actually have a copy of it. From 1919, so this is over 100 years old. And that's the architectural record. And the whole article is printed out on a poster in the hallway. And you can see the plan and the floor plan that they use for Tewksbury, as well as other towns in this book. We're lucky to have eBay. That I just couldn't believe that, I put in the exact month, and it popped right up. And I could buy it for $20 on eBay. I mean, what is that? Like a thing that's 100 years old. So I was pretty happy. So I would like to read something that was actually written in that architectural record by the author of the article, Charles Cornelius. And it says, one of the contributing reasons for the unreserved endorsement of the community house is the fact that latent possibilities have been largely developed by and through conditions arising from the war. A building was required which would serve all the purposes of a club for soldiers during their hours of recreation. The challenge for the architect is bringing the two qualities of the building, informality and commemorative character, together. Each community house success depends on the function it performs and unique needs of each town. It will serve as a center for meeting, for civic, educational, recreational activities. It may also serve as a town hall where public hearings are held and municipal authority would be headquartered. The idea of raising living memorials to the men who have died for a great ideal, memorials whose function it will be to keep alive that ideal and hold it aloft, pass it on to generations to come, makes it an appeal to all who feel that the causes of this war should never be forgotten. No other purpose would be more eminently served by a memorial community building than the encouragement of the meeting of the minds of all classes, united by the bonds of common interest, created by a highly developed community spirit. And I find that to be quite a thoughtful statement about a building. And I do look back over the 100 years that we've had this building. And I feel that our town has kept that whole concept alive. And I hope we continue to do that. So I don't know if anybody wants to ask any questions, or if you need to you know, you can always reach out to me. I'd be happy to answer any questions. But that's pretty much it on that.
Was the building ever officially dedicated to the people who served in World War I? Was there any dedication?
No, we looked it up. We really, at the time, I had the town clerk search her records. There was never any mention of the town hall being called Memorial Town Hall. The architect had used the name in one of his books, but in everything that's written, it was just called the New Town Hall. And so that kind of ended that. Unfortunately, as I said, they didn't have any minutes from the building committee, so we don't know what the intent was. But I will say, you know, Harold Patton, and he wrote the book, Ask Now of Days That Are Past. So he wrote that in 1963. He was actually on the building committee. He does not mention anything about that in his book. I think he would have if it was the case, because he does have a good amount of information about when the town hall was built, and there were some poems and whatnot that were said at the time, and you know, so he covered it, and I think he would have said, you know, it was named this or that, but it doesn't say that. That would be something that we could take up, I suppose, separately.
Thank you very much.
So that's all I had. Thanks so much.
I'm so happy to be working with Nancy on the Historical Society, because she is so thorough and so creative when it comes to going after those facts on whatever it is that she is studying. And I'm amazed we could never replace Nancy, but we could do with another dozen or so in this town. That would really help. So what I'm finishing here with is a poem which you're probably familiar with, but Alan Seeger is an American poet. If you go in and look for World War I poems, they're all British, and pretty much, and we really did not, just like 14, 15 months or so that we were involved in the First World War. And Britain and France were involved a couple of years earlier than we were. Now, Alan Seeger was born in 1888, and he died on the 4th of July in 1916, which was a year before Americans were in the war. Now, he was a scholar, a writer, a poet. He was in the class of 1910 at Harvard College, was also a classmate of T.S. Eliot, who were friends, and it's also a friend and roommate when he lived in Greenwich Village after college of John Reed, who you may be remembered the movie Reds et al. With what's Shirley MacLaine's brother's name there, but Beatty, Warren Beatty, and Gene Hackman and several other notable. One anyways, that's John Reed, who was a correspondent during the Russian Revolution, and he was sending out what he was learning by actually being there. And so he's actually interred within the walls of the Kremlin as a hero of the Russian Revolution. Anyways, Alan Seeger, as I say, after college went and lived in in Greenwich Village, where in a place where there are other notable writers, not all at the same time he's there, but Theodore Dreiser lived in this apartment building. Stephen Crane, Frank Norris, Robert Moses, Sidney Porter, who we know as O. Henry, and John Reed, and other giants. They went from there, many Americans, to Paris, where the art scene and the literary scene at that time was flourishing. And then in April of 2015, when the Germans, and by the way, he's of German ancestry, his great-great-great-grandfather came over from Germany. He was a doctor and started many successful children. He actually is his uncle was Pete Seeger. I don't know if you remember him, who was also a classmate of my dad's, and that his another classmate said repeatedly through his life that the poem I'm about to read, I Have a Rendezvous with Death, was his favorite poem. And that fellow had his rendezvous with death on November 22nd, 1963, in Dealey Plaza in Dallas as part of a motorcade. So he enlisted with the French Foreign Legion. We weren't at war. Americans didn't have any armies over there. And the French Foreign Legion would accept anybody. And he fought for 2 years in combat. And on July 4th, 1916, he was leading a bayonet charge through the trenches when he himself was bayoneted and died. So his zeal for right, his zeal for, even when it's not in his own country, for goodness in trying to put away all of the things that we do not want to see in war come through. So I have a rendezvous with death at some disputed barricade when spring comes back with rustling shade and apple blossoms fill the air. I have a rendezvous with death when spring brings back blue days and fair. It may be he shall shake my hand and lead me into his dark land and close my eyes and quench my breath. It may be I shall pass him still. I have a rendezvous with death on some scarred slope or battered hill when spring comes round again this year and the first meadow flowers appear. God knows 'twere better to be deep pillowed in silk and scented down, where love throbs out in blissful sleep, pulse nigh to pulse and breath to breath, where hushed awakenings are dear. But I have a rendezvous with death at midnight in some flaming town when spring trips north again this year, and I to my pledged words am true. I shall not fail that rendezvous. So in closing, by way of benediction, dear Lord, bless the souls of those departed whose names are inscribed upon this wall, who in a time of need rose up to do their duty, to defend our freedom from tyranny, by giving their youth to the service of others. And may we never forget how 116,000 American young people were wounded or died in this endeavor known as the war to end all wars. We who now depart to our homes, safeguarded by their sacrifices, pledge to honor these who served by maintaining in our lives the love of freedom they strove to preserve and for which they lived and died. Go in peace. Amen. Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Doug. We'd like to close with the singers that we have here from the high school to sing God Bless America.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home.